Yeah, page number.
So, hello, masters. Today we are reading Doctor from Lhasa by Lobsang Grandpa. Just wanting to know what page should we stop on? I'll share my screen.
59th page, I think.
Okay.
9th page.
I am at your service, Honorable Lama of Tibet, fellow student of Chungking. I turned slowly, and there, just behind me, was a pleasant young Chinese monk. I think he rather wondered what my attitude would be to his approach, because I was an abbot, a high lama, and he was just a Chinese monk. But I was delighted to see him. He was Huang, a man whom I was later proud to call a friend. We soon got to know each other, and I was particularly glad to know that he was going to be a middle school student starting on morrow. As I was. I think this is tomorrow, but yeah. He too was going to study those remarkable things, electricity and magnetism. He was, in fact, to be in both of those courses which I was going to study, and we got to know each other very well. We turned and walked back towards the entrance of the lamasery. As we passed the portal, another Chinese monk came forward and said, "We have to report to the college. We have to sign a register." "Oh, I have done that already." All that, I said. "I did it yesterday." "Yes, Honorable Lama," the other replied, "but this is not the studentship register which you sign with us. It is a fraternity register, because in the college we're all going to be brothers, and they are in American colleges. So together we turned down the path once more along the Lamasari path through the trees, the path carpeted with flowers, and we turned into the main road from Kailing to Chungking. In the company of these young men who were same age as I, the journey did not seem so long nor so miserable. So they just talking about like about the friend, and like about that they're gonna sign up for something soon. Once again, we came into the buildings which were to be our daytime home, and we went in. The young clerk in the blue linen dress was really pleased to see us. He said, "Ah, I was hoping you would call. We have an American journalist here who speaks Chinese. He would very much like to meet a High Lama of Tibet." He led us along the corridor again and into another room, a room which I had not previously entered. It appeared to be some sort of reception room, because a lot of young men sitting around about talking to young women, which I thought was rather shocking. I knew very little about women in those days. A tall young man was sitting in a very low chair. He was, I should say, about 30 years of age. He rose as we entered and touched his heart to us in the Eastern way. Of course, I touched mine in return. We were introduced to him, and then for some reason he put out his hand. This time I was not unprepared, took it and shook it in an approved manner. He laughed. Ah, I see that you are mastering the ways of the West and you which are being introduced into chunking. Yes, I said, I have got to the stage of sitting in a perfectly horrible chair instead of shaking hands. He was quite a nice young fellow, and I know his name still. He died in chunking some time ago. We walked into the ground and sat down on a low stone wall where we talked for quite a time. So basically in this page, he just he just entered a page and now he was just introducing how it was in his daytime home and like about some friends that he just met. I told him of Tibet, of our customs. I told him much about my life in Tibet. He told me of America. I asked him what he was doing in Chongqing, a man of intelligence living in a sweltering place like that when apparently there was no particular reason for him to. He said that he was preparing for a series of articles for a very famous American magazine. He asked if he could mention and read it, and I said, well, I would rather that you did not because I'm here for a special purpose, to study, to progress, and to use this as a jumping off point for further journeys into the West. I would rather wait until I have done something notable, something worthy of mention, and then I went on. Then I will get in touch with you and give you this interview which you so much want. He was a decent young fellow and understood my point. We were soon on a quite friendly terms. He spoke Chinese passably well, and we had no particular difficulty in understanding each other. He walked with us a part of the way back to the Lhasa. He said, I would very much like some time if it can be arranged to visit a temple and to take part in the service. I'm not of your religion, he says, but I respect it, and I would like to pay my respects in your temple. All right, I answered. You shall come to our temple. You shall take part in our service, and you will be welcome. That I promise. With that, we parted company because we had so much to do for preparing the morrow when I had to begin this fresh career as a student, and as if I had not been studying all my life. So basically, it's just like a conversation between him and like Rampa. Back in the Lamasery, I had to sort out my things, see to my robes, which had been travel stained. I was going to wash them because, according to our custom, we tend to our own clothing, to our own robes, to our own personal matters. I did not employ servants to do our dirty work for us. I was also later going to wear the clothes of a Chinese student, blue clothes, because my own Namastic robes attracted too much attention and I did not want to be singled out for publicity. I wanted to study in peace. In addition to the usual things such as clothes washing, we had our services to attend, and as a leading Lama, I had to take my share in the administration and these services. Although during the day I was to be a student, yet at the Lama Sari, I still a high-ranking priest with the obligations that went with the office. So the day drew to an end, the day which I thought would never going to end. The day went for the first time in my life. In the morning, it was a warm, sunny. I was completely, utterly cut off my own people. In the morning, it was a warm, sunny morning. Huang and I set off down the road again to a new life, this time as medical students. We soon covered the short journey and went into the college grounds where there seemed to be hundreds of us milling around our notice board. So it is basically about like their routine and how he feels in the day. We carefully read all the notices and found our names were together so that all the times we should be studying together. We pushed our way past others still reading and made our way to the classroom, which had been indicated to us. Here we sat down, rather marveling, or I did, at all the strangeness of the fittings, the desk, and all that. Then after that seemed to be eternity of time. Others came in small groups and took their places. Eventually a gong sounded somewhere and a Chinaman entered. He said, "Good morning, gentlemen." We all rose to our feet because of our regulations said that was the approved method of showing respect, and we replied good morning back to him. He said he was going to give us some written papers, and we were discouraged by our failures. We were not to be discouraged by our failures because his task was to find out what we did not know and not how much we knew. He said that until he could find the exact standard of each of us, he would not be able to assist us. Papers would deal with everything, various questions, all mixed up. A veritable Chinese broth of knowledge dealing with arithmetic, physics, and anatomy, everything relating to medicine and surgery and science, and the subjects which were necessary to enable us to study medicine, surgery, and science to higher levels. He gave us clearly to understand that if we did not know how to answer a question, then we could put down and that we had not studied to the point, but give, if he could, some information so that he could assess us, point at which our knowledge ended. Then he rang the bell. So it's about like a test that they have given about like a knowledge. The door opened and in came two attendants laden with some what seemed to be books. They moved amongst us and distributed these books. They were not books actually, but sheets of question on paper, many sheets of paper which we were to write. The other one came and distributed pencils. We were going to use pencils and not brushes on this occasion. So then we set to reading through all the questions one by one, answering them as best as we could. We could see by the lecturer's aura, or at least I could, that he was a genuine man and that his only interest was to help us. My guide and tutor, the Lama Mingya Donda, had given very highly specialized training. The results of the paper were in about 2 days' time that showed that in very many subjects I was well in advance of my fellow students, but it showed that I had no power whatever of electricity and magnetism. Perhaps a week after the examination, we were in a laboratory where we were to be given our first demonstration. Like me, some of the others had no idea what the meaning of the two dreadful sounding words. The lecturer said had been giving us a talk about electricity. He said, "Now I'll give a practical demonstration of the effects of electricity. Harmless demonstration." He handed me 2 wires and said, "Hold these tightly until I say let go." I thought he was asking me to assist me with its demonstration. He was. And so I held the wires, although I was rather perturbed because Sarah showed me that he was contemplating some form of treachery. I thought, well, perhaps I'm misjudging him. He's not a very nice fellow anyhow. Turned and walked quickly away from me to show to his own demonstrating table. There he pressed the switch, saw a light coming out of the wire, and I saw the aura of the lecturer betray amazement. He appeared to be intensely surprised. Holding tighter, he said, "So I did. Squeezed the wires." The lecturer looked at me and really rubbed his eyes. He was astounded. That was obvious to anyone. Even anyone without the ability to see the aura. It was obvious that the lecturer had never had such a surprise before. The other students looked on an open-mouthed wonder. They could not understand what it was all about. They had no idea at all what was intended. Quickly, the lecturer came back to me, the switching off, and took the 2 wires from me. He said there was something wrong. There must be a disconnection. He took the 2 wires in his hand and went back to the table with them. One wire was in his left hand, the other one was in his right. Still holding them, stretched forth a finger and switched on the switch. Then he erupted into tremendous "Yo! Switch off, it's killing me." At the same time, his body was knotted up as if all his muscles were tied and paralyzed. He continued to yell and scream, and his aura looked like the setting sun. How very interesting, I thought. I had never seen anything as pretty as that in the human aura. It was about like a science experiment that went wrong. The continued shrieks of the lecturer soon brought people running in. One man took a glance of him and rushed to the table, switched off the switch. The poor lecturer dropped to the floor, perspiring freely, shaking. He looked at the sorry sight. His face had a pale greenish tint to it. Eventually, he stood up, clasping the edge of his desk. "You did that to me," I replied. "I haven't done a thing. You told me to hold the wires, and I held them. You took them from me, and you looked as if you were going to die," he said. "I can't understand it. I can't understand it," I answered. "What can't you understand? I held the things. What are you talking about?" He looked at me. "Didn't you really feel anything? Didn't you feel a thing or anything?" "Well," I said, "I felt a pleasant bit of warmth, nothing more." "Why, what should I feel?" Another lecturer, the one who had turned off the switch of the current, said. Will you try it again? I said, of course, I will, as many times as you like. So he handed me the device. He said, now I'm going to switch on. Tell me what happens. He pressed the switch and I said, oh, it's just a pleasant bit of warmth. Nothing to worry about. It's just as if I had my hands fairly close to a fire. He said, squeeze it tight. So I did. Actually squeezed it until the muscles on my stood out on the backs of my hands. The previous lecturer, looked at each other and the current was switched off. And then one of them took the two wires from me, put cloth around them. Then he held them tightly in his hand. Switch on, he said. As the lecturer switched on, and the man with the wires wrapped in the cloth in his hand soon dropped it. He said, oh, it's still on. And the two wires fell free. In the dropping, the two eyes fell free of the cloth and touched. There's a blue vivid flash, and a lump of molten metal jumped from the end of the wire. Now it looks like you. Now you have blown the freezer, said one. He went off to do repair somewhere. With the current restored, they went on with their lecture about electricity. They said that they were trying to give me 250 volts as a shock to show what electricity can do. I have a particularly dry skin, and 250 volts hurt me not at all. I can put my hands on the mains and be quite unaware of whether they are on or not. The poor lecturer was not of that type at all. He was completely remarkably susceptible to electric currents. In the course of the lecture, they said in America, if a man commits murder, the lawyers say that he's the guilt of murder. The man is killed by electricity. So he's strapped to the chair. So he is strapped to a chair. The current is applied to his body and it kills him. Thought how very interesting. I wonder what they would do to me, though I have no desire to try it seriously. So it's about like the science thing, and like 250 volts is nothing for a Lobes and Grump. One minute. A dank grey fog came down from the hills about Chungking, blotted out the houses, the river, the mass of the ships down below. Turning the lights in the shops of the orange-yellow blurs, deadening the sounds, perhaps even improving the appearance of part of Chungking. There was a slithering sound of footsteps, and a bent old man came dimly into sight through the fog, and was as quickly lost to view again. It was strangely silent here. The only sounds were muffled sounds. The fog was as a thick blanket deadening all. Huang and I had finished our classes for the day, and it was now a late evening. We decided to go out from the college, from the connecting rooms to get a breath of fresh air. Instead, we got this fog. I was feeling hungry, apparently, so was Swang. The dampness had got into our bones and chilled us. Let's go and have some food, Lobsang. I know a very good place, said Huang. All right, I answered. I'm always ready for something interesting. What have you got to show me? Oh, I want to show you that we in Chungking can live quite well in spite of what you say. He turned and led me to the way, or rather, he turned and groped blindly till reached the side of the street that we were able to identify the shops. We went down the hill a little turn and then through an entrance that appeared to be remarkably like a cavern in the side of a mountain. Inside, the air was even thicker than outside. People were smoking great, belching great clouds of evil smelling fumes. It was not the first time I'd seen a number of people smoking. It was quite a novelty, a nauseating one, to see people with burning brands in their mouth and smoke trickling out of their nostrils. One man attracted my fascinating gaze. He was producing smoke not from his nostril but from his ears. I pointed him out to Huang. Oh, him, he said. He's stone deaf, you know. He had eardrums kicked in. It's quite social asset with him. No eardrums to impede the smoke. So he sends it out of his nostril and out of his ears too. He goes up to foreigner and says, give me a cigarette and I'll show you something you can't do. Keeps him in smokes. That's nothing. Let's get on with the food. I'll order the meal, said Huang. I'm well known here and should get the best at the lowest price. Suited me fine. I had not been eating too well during the past few days. Everything was so strange, and the food was utterly alien. Huang spoke to one of the waiters who had made notes on his little pad. Then we sat down and talked. Food had been one of my problems. I could not obtain the type of food I was accused to eat, among other things, flesh and fish. To me, as a Lama of Tibet, this was truly revolting. But I had been told by my seniors at the Potala in Lhasa that I would be to accustom myself to alien foods, and I had been given absolution from them for the type of food I should consume. In Tibet, the priest had ate no meat, but this was not Tibet, and I had to continue to live in order to fulfill my allotted task. It was impossible to obtain the food I wanted, so I had to eat the revolting messes brought me, and I pretended that I liked them. Our lunch arrived, half tortoise surrounded with sea slugs, and followed by a dish of curried frogs with cabbage leaves around them. They were quite unpleasant, but I would have preferred my own sampa. So, making the best of things, I had my meal of curried frogs, well supported with noodles and rice. We drank tea, the only thing I had never touched in spite of all exhortations from those outside of Tibet. had been intoxicating liquors. Never, never, never. In our belief, there's nothing worse than these intoxicating drinks, nothing worse than drunkenness. Drunkenness, we consider, is the most vicious sin of all, because when our body is sodden with the drink, the astral vehicle, the more spiritual part of them, the driven out of the physical, has to leave it as prey to any prowling entities. This is not only life, but the physical body is just one particular manifestation, the lowest manifestation, and the more one drinks, the more one harms one's body in other planes of existence. It's well known that drunkards see pink elephants cure pink elephants? That's odd. And cures things which have no parallel in the physical world. These we believe are the manifestations of some evil entity, some entity who is trying to make the physical body do some harm. It is well known that those who are drunk are not in possession of their right senses, who are not at any time touched intoxicating drinks, not in corn spirit, not in rice wine. Lackward, so like he just like saying like about like his trip, he is going to some place to eat food, and a half tortoise. Very, very interesting. I don't think anyone would eat that, but maybe over here, maybe some people eat that, but definitely not me. Lacquer duck is a very nice form of food. Lacquer duck sounds very odd. For those who like meat, that is, I much prefer bamboo shoots. These are unobtainable in the West, of course. The nearest substitute to it is a form of celery, which grows in quite a certain European country. The English celery is quite different and is not so suitable. While discussing Chinese food, it is possibly of some interest to say that there's no dish as chop suey, and that just a name, a generic name for Chinese food, any Chinese food. If anyone wants a really good Chinese food, they should go to a first class all Chinese restaurant and have a ragu of mushroom and bamboo shoot. And then they should get a fish soup. After that, lacquer duck. You will not have a carving knife in the real Chinese restaurant. The waiter will come along with a small hatchet and he will chuck up the duck for you in suitably sized slices. When these are approved by you, they will be wrapped up in a piece of young onion in a sandwich full of unleavened bread. One picks up these small sandwiches, devours each at a mouthful. The meal should end with lotus leaves, or if you prefer, lotus root. Some people prefer lotus seed, but whichever is you need, you will need adequate quantities of Chinese tea. This is a type of meal we had in that eating house so well to Huang. That price was surprisingly reasonable, and when surely we rose to continue our journey, we were added in quite a blissful state of geniality, well padded and well fortified with good food to go out again and face the fog. So we made our way up the street along the road to Kailing. And when we part away along the road, we turned right to the path leading up to our temple. It was service time when we got back. The tablets were hanging limply against their poles. There was no breeze, and the clouds of incense were just hanging motionless too. The tablets of red material with gold Chinese ideographs upon them. They were the tablets of the ancestors and were used in much the same way as tombstones used to commemorate the dead in the Western countries. We bow to Ho Tai and Ho Kuan Yin, the god of the good living and the goddess of compassion, went our way into the dimly lit interior of the country for our service. After which we were unable to face our evening meal, instead rolled ourselves into our blankets and drifted off to sleep. There were never any shortage of bodies for dissection. Bodies in chunking the time were as a very obtained commodity. Later in the war started, we were to have more corpses than we could ever deal with. But these were obtained by dissection. We kept in an underground room which was carefully cooled. As soon as we could obtain a fresh body from the streets or from a hospital, we used to inject the ground a most powerful disinfection that served to preserve the body for some months. It was quite interesting to go down to the basement and see the bodies in slabs and to notice how invariable they were thin. They were. We used to have heated disputes as to which of us should have the thinnest. The fat bodies were great trouble in dissecting. There was so much labor with so little result. One could go on cutting and cutting, dissecting out a nerve or an artery and have to dissect away layer after layer of fatty tissues. Bodies were not in short supply at all. Frequently, we had so many on hand and that we kept on in tanks in pickle, as we called it. Of course, it was not always easy to smuggle a body into the hospital because some of the relatives had strong opinions about such things. In those days, young babies who had died were abandoned in the streets, or those adults whose families were too poor to pay a satisfactory funeral left them out in the streets under cover of darkness. We medical students and frequently went out in the early morning to pick up the best looking bodies and of course the leanest. We could have had a whole body to ourselves. Often we worked to a cadaver, one doing the head, the other doing the feet. That was much more companionable. Quite frequently, we had a lunch in the dissecting room if we were studying for some examination. It was no uncommon thing to see a student with his food spread out on the stomach of a cadaver, while his textbook, which he was reading, would have propped against the thigh. It was never occurred to us as at that time that we were obtaining all sorts of curious complaints through our infection from dead bodies. Our principal, Dr. Lee, had the most latest American ideas. In some ways, He was almost a crank from copying the Americans, but by no matter. He was a good man, one of the most brilliant Chinamans that I've ever met. It was a pleasure to study with him. I learned a lot and passed many examinations, but I still maintain that I have learned far more morbid from the body breakers of Tibet. So it's about like mostly about the chopping of body and like what they do, how they do it, and also a lot of disgusting stuff that some people don't want to hear. So is that enough for today?
Yes, Mukund.